So Brother Jerry's going to come and get here a real speaker now. And Brother Jerry is a former compulsive gambler that has an incredible testimony. So thank you so much for your attention. This class was great, Dr. Fletcher. They were at least listening, or made me think they were listening. So great job, great job.
Thank you, Ken. You're a real speaker. I can't speak as fast as Ken, but God bless him. Revelations 12:11 is one of my favorite scriptures, and it goes, they overcame him, Satan, by the blood of the Lamb, Jesus Christ, and the power of their own testimony. And my testimony today is, I'd like to share with you, is what I went through with the gambling from even an early age, the progressive nature of how it was slow, subtle in the early stages, but how it became so progressive and destructive, then ultimately how the Lord rescued me from a certain destruction. My gambling, I've kind of traced it all the way back to third grade, when my best friend then had a poker table down in his basement. And it was a brand new poker table with green felt. It had cup holders for us to put our pop in. In fact, we had to put our pop in there. We were ordered to put in because we couldn't spill on the felt to ruin it. And we would play penny ante poker after school. My parents knew where I was and what I was doing, and they really didn't have any objections because, you know, I wasn't out on the streets, running the streets. They knew where I was at, and everything had to end at 5 o'clock so we could get home for dinner, each of us, the guys that were playing. But even early on then, when I started to play this penny ante poker, there was a certain excitement going through my spirit, really. And, you know, I enjoyed when I won the pots and won the pennies. And when I would look at the clock and I would see that it was getting close to 5 o'clock, I really didn't want to go home for dinner. I would have rather continued to play. So already, you know, as Ken said in his presentation, what's wrong with sin? You know, what is Satan's answer? Nothing. You know, go ahead and try it. But that one time, and really I can even see that one time, even at that early age, playing penny ante poker was really the start, was really the opening for me to let sin, let gambling into my life. After that, I started pitching coins, and in Chicago, where I grew up, every 2 lines you would try to throw. I started out with nickels. We would throw, and the person who was closest to the line would win everybody's nickels. If you put it over the 2 lines, they called that a bridge. That was even better than a liner. So you'd want to try to get a bridge, but very few times people did that. But when I started playing with nickels, I was playing with kids my own age, and the older kids were already playing for quarters. So I saw something start to develop in my life. I wanted to be a bigger risk taker. So I went out, I got my first job in 5th grade hustling newspapers. And when other kids my age were, you know, doing jobs, even at that young age, they were opening up their own bank account, you know, savings account, where with me, everything I made was going to pitching with the older guys. So I started hanging out when I was like in 4th or 5th grade. I was hanging out with 7th and 8th graders because they were pitching quarters and gambling at higher risk. And that, again, continued with poker. I heard of a poker game in the neighborhood bowling alley. And so when I was in 7th and 8th grade, again, I continued working odd jobs and that. And when I, would get my money on Saturday, I'd go up to this bowling alley, and before the bowling started, they'd have poker games. The guy would open it up, and he would host poker games in the morning. And I would go up there and gamble with now high school kids. I'd be gambling with juniors and seniors in high school, and I'm 7th, 8th grader, and they were playing for higher stakes again with this poker. looking back on it, I very seldom, I remember walking up these stairs to, it was an upstairs type bowling alley. I very seldom came down the stairs a winner, if at all. And they probably were cheating me back then. But again, it was just the thrill of gambling with older kids and risk taking and the action. You know, it wasn't about, even back then, winning and losing. It was really the action. I really enjoyed the gambling. In high school, my folks, who were not compulsive gamblers, liked to go to the racetrack once a year. And we had a large racetrack, Arlington Park Racetrack, in the suburbs of Chicago. And they took me there. And they have what they call, you can bet a daily double. And the daily double is where you can bet the winner in the first race with the winner in the second. You have to pay, back then it was a minimum bet of $2 you had to put on that bet. And if the winner of the first and the second win, you win, you know, a sizable amount of money. Well, I remember betting the 6 horse in the first race, and then I bet the 6 horse in the second race. And the 6 did win the first, and the 6 won the second. And with that $2 bet, I won $80. And by winning that $80, I was really hooked on horse racing from that day forward. I really thought betting the horses was easy. I thought, you know, honestly, I had found heaven on earth. This was going to be an easy stream of money. But boy, to my surprise, it's probably one of the hardest forms of gambling, trying to pick a winner out of 9, 10, or 11 horses each race. And again, it goes back to what Ken said. What your parents do in moderation, the children will do in excess. Even though my parents weren't compulsive gamblers and liked this as a form of entertainment, by them bringing me to the track, again, I was exposed to that gambling. After that, I, getting into high school in freshman year, our elementary school had a very good basketball team. We were really well known, but I wasn't good enough to play basketball. So come freshman year in high school, even though we didn't have an elementary football team, I figured, well, let me go out for football, and this will be my way, my MO, my way of getting to know people who I would be in high school. So I went out for the high school football team, and I made it to the final cut, which was more than anybody else from our elementary. Everybody else from our school got cut, but I got there to the final cut. And I remember they said we're going to wear equipment for the final practice before the cut. And I was so used to playing tackle football pickup games without any equipment. I never wore equipment. I remember asking some of the guys who, had elementary football background, I said, well, where do you put the pads? And they had to show me where to slot the pads in on the uniform and that. Anyway, I went out there that day, and I got hurt. It was a rough final practice, and I did not make the team, and I got cut. And I remember walking home from that rejection, really, in my life, wondering, what am I going to do now? And shortly thereafter, I was approached by someone who said I could pass out these gambling cards to fellow students. And they were cards with the professional or college sports teams on. And they would pick the number of teams, and for $1, you had to at least play it for $1. You could play it for more. You had to pick a minimum 3 teams. And so I would pass these cards out on a Monday, collect the money with their picks, and then if they won, and there were very few that ever won, it was really tough to win on these things, I would pay them off their winnings. And I did this for I think it was a couple months, and I felt the feeling of importance. People had to see me during the week to get them, and it got me meeting more guys. But it was a private all-boys high school I was attending, and I came very close to getting caught by we were taught by Irish Christian brothers. I almost got caught passing these things out, and so I knew my time was short if I kept this up, so I quit doing that, because I would have really either been suspended or probably expelled for passing these out. Continued then after high school, I did get into college. I went to Illinois State University, and my dad got me a job with the city of Chicago, a laboring job. And I had to pay my way through college. But it was a good job. It was the type of job I really, could have paid my own tuition at the state college. And because I ended up getting connected with 2 juniors and 1 senior, they like to do harness racing, horse racing. And boy, you know, we started going at nighttime after classes, and we started going to the local racetracks, and the money that I had saved for college in my account started dwindling. And so come March of my freshman year in high school is when I developed what most compulsive gamblers, well, I should say not most, all compulsive gamblers develop, is a spirit of lying. A compulsive gambler will lie, tell one story after another in order to get money with which to gamble. So in March, I called my parents back home, and it was the first time I lied to them. I said, you know, Mom and Dad, I said, you know, college is more expensive than I thought. Could you lend me money to get through the end of the year? And when I get my first check, I'll pay you back. And it was a lie. You know, I had it, like I say, my money was going to the local racetrack. I did, by the grace of God, you know, graduate college, and a day that should be very special, and it will be for you and your loved ones and parents, and that is graduation day. My mom especially was looking forward to the commencement exercise, come and see me, you know, walk down the aisle and get my diploma. But I knew that day there was a stakes race, a large horse race at Arlington Park, where they had brought me years earlier. And there was a particular horse that I wanted to bet that day. So when about a week or 2 before, you know, she was, you know, gearing up to go to my graduation, I made up a story, and I told them, you know, Mom, all my friends that she knew, their parents, you know, none of them are going, you know, they're all getting their diplomas mailed to them. Nobody really wants to go to the graduation. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to get mine mailed to me. And I look back, you know, regrets, and that's one thing I really regret is because of, you know, the addiction progressing such as it did, that I didn't allow my folks to enjoy that day. And the horse lost. I lost all my money at Arlington Park. That was the end of that day. After college, after graduation, I had a first opportunity. I was a member of a fraternal organization, Knights of Columbus. I joined there. To be honest with you, I joined, oh boy, when I was 17 or 18 years old, because we could sneak a beer or two. You know, the bartender, if it was the right bartender, he would serve us, you know. And so I heard about it. I said, yeah, geez, I'll join anything that, you know, you can get underage drinking, you know. So I joined there, and anyway, I was 22 years old, and a trip organized to go to Las Vegas. And needless to say, you know, nobody had to urge me to go. I jumped in, and there were 21 of us that went out there on the trip, 20 guys and there was one girl that went, and that was a newlywed. She would not let her husband go with 20 guys too. They had just got married, go to Vegas by himself with a group of guys. We got out there 11:30, checked into our room, and the hotel clerk said, you know, your rooms aren't ready. Here, we'll give you a luggage tag for your suitcases. We've got a storage room in the back. Go out into the casinos, enjoy yourself for a couple hours gambling, come back. Your room should be ready around 2 o'clock. At 2 o'clock, when I went back there to get my luggage, I had lost all my money. So in the 2.5 hours, even before I check into my room, I've got no money, and I've got to spend the whole weekend there in Las Vegas. Well, you would think that would have been the telltale sign for me to say, boy, casino gambling isn't where it's at. I mean, this really isn't any fun to go a whole weekend. You know, I did borrow money to get food and maybe gamble a little more from other people, but you know, it was a terrible way to start. One thing happened there that really affected me, really in a detrimental way, is that there was a guy across from me. I was playing the dice where I lost my money that couple hours. And he, instead of like myself and other people where you put the cash up to get chips, he was signing a slip of paper, and he was getting a big rack of chips. And so I said to the guy next to me, I said, well, who is this guy? How come he doesn't have to put up money like the rest of us? And the guy said to me, well, he's a high roller, a big shot. You know, he's got a line of credit. He gets free room and beverage and food and everything, you know. So, you know, he doesn't have to put up the money like the rest of us. And you know, right then and there, I purposed in my heart that I wanted to be like him. And the book of Proverbs, chapter 14, verse 12 says, there is a way that seems right unto man, but in the end it leads to death. And so just seeing, even though it was a short 2 hours, just seeing him and having him sign a slip of paper and getting the chips, and you know, I purposed, like I say, I wanted to be like him. After that trip, I came back and I was employed with a Fortune 500 company. I had a sales job, real nice job, company car. But every time I got paid, I was losing all the money. I was, borrowing money from high school friends. You know, I should have had plenty of money, but everything was being gambled away. And so I in my territory, there was an Army recruitment center. And I said, well, maybe a geographical cure will make a difference. So I walked in there, and they ran me the whole spiel of where, you know, because you have a college education, you can be an officer. You don't have to go through other things. And they put the paperwork in front of me, pen in hand. So they said, sign here. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, let me sleep on it. I'll be back here tomorrow. And that night I went home, and it was the first time I actually was honest with my father. I asked him to come out for a cup of coffee, and I said, and I leveled with him. I said, Dad, I really am struggling in life with gambling, and I just can't stop. I'm thinking about joining the Army. Well, my dad was a 5-year World War II veteran, and he said to me, he says, kid, he says, if you think you're going to stop gambling by joining the Army, he says, you're crazy. He says, there's more gambling there, poker games, you'll get your check, you'll end up blowing your check and borrowing money from other soldiers and stuff. He says, what you have to do is, he says, just use willpower and stop gambling and find yourself a good woman. And, I did the latter. I found myself a good woman. And within about a week or two after that, I found who is now my wife of 33 years. Her name is Pat. But as far as the willpower, stopping gambling, it wasn't going to work. It wasn't going to happen. I just couldn't stop gambling. And so it just continued. About a couple years later, at age 28, an opportunity to move to California and start a business with two other guys. And one of them was like me. He was a compulsive gambler, and he drank and did drugs, and I did too. I was doing cocaine now at the time. When you're doing one thing, you take on these other carriers, these other addictions. And so I was drinking and doing that. And then the third partner, he didn't like to gamble as much, but he liked to do the drugs and drinking. So the three of us were just like a lethal combination. But we made a pact, especially the one partner and myself, not to gamble at all until we could build up the business. And so for the first year, we just worked hard, promoted the product we got involved in, because we knew those casinos were just a few hours away, and that if we worked hard enough, we would reward ourselves. And so we built up the business. I didn't gamble for a year, but I missed it. It was like they call a dry drunk. I thought about gambling every day. I thought about, I can't wait till I get the money comes in and we can get to Tahoe. I knew it was just a few hour drive, and Vegas, we could fly there, and Reno. And sure enough, the money started to come in, and then we went to the casino. And on the first trip back to the casino, I had a big win, and we got approached by the casino manager. He came over and wanted to know my name and where I was from, and he called me over and my other partner, and we actually had our banker. We had got hooked up with a banker that liked to gamble. He was on the trip, so one thing led to another. Next thing you know, we're filling out cards to get a line of credit. He says, you guys, let me set you up with a line of credit. You don't want to be carrying cash here. You could, it's more safe to just set up a line of credit. And so when I filled out that card and he stamped approved and gave me a line of credit, and I went to that table, and now I could sign a slip of paper. I didn't have to put the cash on. I felt, wow, now I've arrived. Just what I wanted to do 7 years earlier has now come to pass. And again, the book of Proverbs says there is a way that seems right unto man, but in the end it leads to death. And then after that, there was more law. After that one win, I started continually going to casinos, sometimes by myself, My wife then, who, wife Pat, we were dating, like I say, we had been on a 6-year relationship, on again, off again because of my gambling. When I would lose, I'd tell her, get away from me, go find somebody else, but then I'd get a win and get some money in my pocket. I'd call her up on the phone, hey, let's get back together again. Finally, after 6 years, she had had enough of that. She said to me, either we get, move on, get married, she kind of gave me an ultimatum is what she did, or that's it. And, even though as sick as I was, I knew that she was the best thing for me. I was never going to find anyone quite like her. And so, thankfully, I told her to fly out to California. She was still living in Chicago. We got engaged and then got married shortly thereafter in Chicago. We had a big wedding. We had a lot of friends. We had 425 people come to our wedding. Even though we paid for the wedding, there was a lot of money afterwards, wedding gifts back then. But she didn't want to go on a honeymoon to any gambling place. She knew better than that. So I said, I agreed to it. I said, yeah, we'll go to Hawaii. I know we had never been there. We went there, and after a couple days, as Ken said, it's one of the 2 states there's no gambling. I started getting a little stir crazy. I mean, she went to sleep at night. I'm out there trying to find a poker game in Hawaii, and I couldn't find any action. And finally, there was a set of circumstances that happened that allowed me to convince her to cut that trip short and let's go to Las Vegas for our last 2 days of our honeymoon. We flew to Las Vegas. The night before we were to come home, she went to sleep, and I went downstairs and I lost all of our wedding money. And woke up the next morning, I had a $25 chip left, and I knew it cost $15 to get back to the airport. And I said, I can't blow that. Well, I go down the next morning by myself. She was getting the bags packed or whatnot. And I said, well, I can gamble $10. Maybe I can do something with that, I lost the $10, and then I did something, I bet another $10, and I lost that. So all I had was $5 left. So if you can picture this, it's the middle of August. It's over 100 degrees in Las Vegas. We get in a cab. And it was a lady cab driver. I'm watching the meter from the back seat, and I see $4.70, $4.80, at $4.90. I tell her to stop. She says, stop, and she stops the cab. We're in the middle of a desert, because the airport's a ways away still. And she says, what's wrong? I says, oh, I just have $5, let us out. Well, she had mercy on us and took us all the way to the airport. But I think back on that, and I think, boy, this is gambling progressive? Is it destructive? And what a terrible way, really, to start a marriage. And things really kept getting progressively worse. I ran out of places to get money. I maxed out 17 credit cards. I started owing bookmakers money. Family and friends were never an option anymore to get money. And so my barber, who also was a compulsive gambler, he told me about the mafia, that I could get a street loan from them, So I was so desperate, I met with them. And the mafia, I'll tell you, you see the TV programs or whatnot, these really, they are real people, they're not someone you really want to mess around with. And I really made a pact with them. I got cash from them, and my deal was I had to pay so much each week, just interest, VIG, they called it. Well, I told my wife, I was going to Los Angeles on business. It was due a time where I had to make my payment to the mafia, and I instead was planning on going to Las Vegas. I lied to my wife, and so I asked my barber. I said, "Would you give?" The guy's name was Frank. I said, "Would you give Frank my payment?" And he said he would. Well, it turns out he took my payment to the local racetrack and blew my payment to him. And so he couldn't pay him off. And so I'm down in Las Vegas on a hotel phone, and my wife thinks I'm in Los Angeles, and she says, Jerry, it's interesting, we had someone come over to the house, and he said he was a friend of yours from business, and he said he asked to see Brian, who then was my infant son. He was 3 months old at the time, and wanted to see Brian. And so she said, I went to the nursery, brought him to the screen door, and he left a message for you. And she says, I really can't make sense of it, but he said, when you talk to your husband next, tell him your son Brian has a beautifully shaped head. And he walked away. Now I'm in a hotel room and I get this message, and I just told her I have to get off the phone, I got to get back on a job site. But I remember hanging that phone up in that Las Vegas hotel room saying to myself, you know, how much further are you going to take this? Now you're really jeopardizing your family, your life, or your son. And so that really was my bottom. I flew back to California. I'd like to say it was the last time I gambled, but I went one more time to the local racetrack. Again, hoping to get a big win, get out. I had all sorts of, like I say, judgments and callers, bookies I owed and everything. And again, I lost all my money. And I got in the car that day after leaving the racetrack with having lost everything. And I couldn't turn over the car, and I just sat in the car, and I uttered 8 words that changed my life. And I said, God, I am so sick. Please help me. And you know, I was so sick back then and so alienated from God. I didn't think, you know, he could hear a person like me. You know, really all the things I did to support my gambling, all the things, you know, I had gone, you know, through. I didn't know if he could really hear me, but he heard my cry. And a couple days later, he led me to the local chapter of Gamblers Anonymous. And I met a man there, a complete stranger. You know, he wasn't a Christian, but he was somebody who had, you know, owed money to the casinos, owed money to the mafia, and he had 2 years free of gambling. And he shared with me, if I want to get well, this is what I had to do. And with a pocket full of change, you know, the next day I took his direction and called the casinos, I called the bookmakers, and I called the mafia guy. I told him, Jesus, if you come over to break my legs, I can't work. If I can't work, I can't pay you. And so I acknowledged to all my debtors, you know, I was in Gamblers Anonymous. They were going to get paid, but it was just going to take, you know, some time, you know. And it was the first time really in my adult life I can honestly say I was honest. And it felt like, you know, some poison was coming out of my system, you know. And I continued to go, you know, Gamblers Anonymous, moved back to Chicago with my wife 90 days later. You know, I had 90 days free of gambling. Continued to go to Gamblers Anonymous in the Chicago area, and there God really put a couple that had been in GA and the Gammon on the women's support group before us for about 8 or 10 years, and they were Christians, and they shared the gospel with Pat and I, and we accepted Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. And many things changed after that. Things that I had been struggling with financially, there were some, God miraculously opened up some avenues, you know, both with the business I was doing. I was able to quit a part-time job because I was working 2 jobs at the time. You know, all the things I thought that I could get by gambling, I got by not gambling. And I was blessed with 2 more children, one who is a sophomore here, as Dr. Fletcher talked about. Her name's Laura, and I had another daughter. Her name was Katie, and Katie 7 years ago, she was in the Master's Commission in Rockford, and she had a call in her life. She wanted to be a missionary to India ever since 6th grade, and she wanted to work to rescue young girls from the brothels. And so that was her heart's desire. And she was on her way to school one morning, and her and another precious girl named Wendy, they were in a car accident and they were killed instantly. And they went to be with the Lord hand in hand. And, you know, I'm just so thankful, you know, because of the deliverance from gambling. See, our marriage 33 years ago, I wouldn't have given it 1 in a million chance, but God works the impossible odds. And what a privilege it was to be her dad for 19 years that she was here. And now to be blessed with another daughter, Laura. She's the same age as Katie was when she went to heaven. It's just, it's a beautiful thing to be able to be honest in a marriage after lying for so many years. It's a treat, it really is, to be able to be truthful and to have a marriage that, you know, the Lord's afforded me. And it really is my heart that, not one of you really get exploited or get caught up in this. You know, these people know what they're doing, these gambling establishments. You know, people that, if you're out there and you beat the video games, you got to the top level, fantastic, tuck it in. Go do something else in your life. Don't think that because you beat a video game, you can beat them. You know, I couldn't, and you know, I've known many other people, like I say, this woman that killed her children for insurance money. I was the first person she met in Gamblers Anonymous that came in. I would have thought she was just like any housewife, you know. Little did I know what she had done, and she's spending a 25-year sentence in prison for what she did. You know, it's a terrible, terrible destructive illness. And if you don't go the first time, guys, you know, who like to bet, like sports, you're apt to get some things like this. And when you become 21, they'll send this stuff to you in the mail with spreads of games and point spreads, and they offer you, if you open up an account, they'll give you the first couple $100. I had one place said they wanted to give me $800 if I would open up an account with them. You know, $800, the way I gamble, would be gone in a day, and I'd be right back into trouble. But when you get these things, please rip them up. Just rip them up. You're going to get offers at age 21 to go to the casinos. They're going to throw, if you're near one, they're going to mail one to you in the mail. They're going to say, oh, come on out, you got a free buffet dinner. And you'll say to yourself with a friend, well, let's just go out there, we'll just eat. You know, we don't have to gamble. Just being in the environment, just being in the aura of this stuff will, you know, the enemy will try to draw you in. And so it's my prayer that what Ken said today, my testimony I shared with you, really penetrates your hearts, and that you find other ways that God would want you to live your lives, the purpose in your lives, and to have joy in your life other than even ever gambling. If you have already, if you've already gambled, and the truths of what Ken has shared about gambling is now, you know, more true. You know, today could be your last day. Just ask the Lord to, you know, just get it right with the Lord, settle it with Him. That, you know, I don't want to go that any further than what I've already gone. And again, I thank, you know, Dr. Fletcher for giving us the opportunity. It's a privilege to share this with you. Thank you so much.